remembered. And I'm going to I need to enable myself as a host on the other machine so that it will. So today, what we are going to do is we are going to do this convergence of series and do some well-known tests of convergence. Some of them you know, but the root test and the ratio test, you would have perhaps done it in school, college, whatever, but we will do in a formal way, proving it in the way we are doing it. Make co-host. Yeah. So the thing we are going to look for is you have a series summation n equal to 1 to infinity an, and when does it converge? Okay, under what conditions on an will it converge? Ideally, as in mathematics, you would like to have necessary and sufficient condition. If you have that, that's the end of it. But unfortunately, for a sequence, the necessary and sufficient condition trackable. There may be some, but then they are as good or as bad as the original one. What we have are various tests. If that works, it may resolve the issue, whether it is convergence or divergence, or it may be this test is not going to differentiate between the two. Not good enough. Things like that. So before we go on to the test, what is it that we have discovered about convergence of series? Well, one is that if given a series an, if summation absolute value of an is finite, then the series an converges. That is one. Then we have seen that for a r which is strictly less than 1, if an is less than equal to r power n, then okay, these are two things we have seen. And here an less than equal to r power n, even if it doesn't hold for all n, but it holds for, let's say, n bigger than equal to 10 power 5, it will still work, because convergence or non-convergence of a series doesn't change when you alter or change or drop or add finitely many points in between. That's something very, very easy to see. Okay, because we want, what is our definition of convergence? Our definition is you look at Sn equal to summation n equal to 1 to k equal to 1 to n ak, and then it's a convergence or otherwise of Sn. Now, Sn converges if and only if Tn converges, where Tn is, say, Sn plus some fixed constant c. You add a constant for a sequence, convergence or otherwise doesn't change. So the same thing gets transported to series, that in the series you change first finitely many points, any finitely many components of that sequence of that series, the divergence or convergence does not change. If the original one is converging, so is the new one, and vice versa. Okay. Yeah.
Are we going through this rearrangement of series?
Not at this moment, no.
Oh, sir. Actually, I joined the class somewhat late.
Sorry?
I just joined the class somewhat late. I mean, 5 minutes late, so I thought it was.
Okay. No, I'm not going over the rearrangement. I've put a problem in the session, in the things which I have shared, and the problems we will discuss on Friday. So that gives everybody some time to at least try to see how you would approach one or the other problem there, etc. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so right now I am just going to do tests of convergence, and I'm just recalling what exactly we have done about. You have a series summation an, then you have seen that if it is absolutely convergent, namely summation mod an is finite, then summation an itself is finite. If mod an is less than equal to r power n, whereas r is less than 1, it is convergent. And then I was now talking about that this whatever property we are seeing, if it holds for all n after some point, even then it is the same thing. Okay. So for example, if this condition holds for n bigger than equal to 10 power 5, fine. If it holds for n bigger than equal to much larger number, even then fine. So primarily it's a question of what happens to it for large n. All right. The other thing we have seen was that if domination test or domination criteria or whatever, or there are various names for this, but if mod bn is less than equal to an and summation an is finite, then summation bn is also finite. Not the other way. Summation an equal to infinity doesn't tell you anything about summation bn being infinite. Of course, summation bn being infinite will tell you summation an is infinite because it is a negation of this. If A implies B, then negation of B implies A. Negation of B implies negation of A. So from there, it will follow that if summation Bn itself is divergent, then summation An will also be divergent. Okay. So there are one of the things which most of you would have seen in school is the so-called ratio test. That is, if you take the ratio of n plus 1th term by and the nth term, okay? If the limit exists and is finite, so here in this test, there are two things which are being said. Namely, firstly, that this ratio an plus 1 by an, this is convergent as n goes to infinity, and then converges to some quantity less than 1. The conclusion is that this series is convergent. So summation an is that's our terminology, that this is convergent. Now, if R is bigger, I'm not going to write that, but I'm just going to tell you that if the same thing holds, if limit is there, R, where R is bigger than 1, then it says that this, at least the absolute value term, that series is not convergent. does not converge. We do not say anything about we cannot say anything about summation an, because this alternating thing can be just smashing away things and it may be ending up converging. So we are not saying anything about summation an, but if the ratio test fails, so ratio test succeeds means r less than 1, then you say convergence. Ratio test fails means bigger the ratio is bigger than 1, ratio exists and is bigger than 1, then it is not absolutely convergent. Okay. And if r equal to 1,
Sir, if the limit of the ratio does not exist, then we can't conclude anything, right?
no. If the limit does not exist, we cannot conclude. If the limit exists and is less than 1, we can say it is convergent. If limit exists and is bigger than 1, we say that absolutely not convergent. Okay. And if the limit is equal to 1 or the limit does not exist, then it is, we cannot say anything. Inconclusive. Okay. So first, let us write the proof, which is very easy, and then we will discuss some examples of all the three kinds, and let's understand what it does. Okay. So if what does it mean? Is equal to r less than 1. If limit is equal to r, that means you go r plus epsilon. You can choose any epsilon. So we can go choose epsilon such that r plus, it is between r and 1, right? So instead of saying the word epsilon, I'm going to use r0 or r1, something like that. Then let's in fact take r1 to be 1 plus r by 2. So this is another philosophy I have, that wherever choose any, if you can explicitly choose something which satisfies the given condition that you want, you can just write that down. So take r1 to be 1 plus r by 2. That is also less than 1. Okay. And what do we have? Convergence says that there exists a n0 such that mod an plus 1 by mod an is less than equal to r1 for n bigger than equal to n0. Right? So we can conclude therefore that mod an is less than equal to an0 times r1 to the power n minus n0. By induction or by whatever means you can show that, because mod an plus 1 will be mod an, etc., dot, 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 till you go down to an0 and you will get this. Okay, so okay, for n0 fixed, if you take the summation of r1 to the power n minus n0, n bigger than equal to n0, that is finite, geometric series. And that proves that summation mod an is finite. Because this is convergent and mod an n equal to n0 to infinity mod an converges, and then finitely many terms you add, and therefore summation mod an converges. Right? So this is the condition about mod an plus 1 divided by mod n equal to r, where r is less than 1. Any question about this? This proof essentially you might have seen in school, maybe, but maybe the background of what exactly convergence means and these things were not that precise. Now all that have been made precise, but essentially the same idea that you might have seen. So, yeah. Okay. Now, to show that something is not convergent, perhaps I didn't spend enough time on that. So, if the nth term, if you have a summation a and n, the nth term does not go to 0, that already tells you that the series cannot be convergent. Because if Sn converges, Sn plus 1 also converges to same quantity, and therefore Sn minus Sn plus 1 minus Sn should be going to 0. So if an mod an is not, if that is not going to 0, the series has to be divergent. So for non-divergence, when r is bigger than 1, this condition will tell you the opposite inequality, and you will get that nth term is not going to 0. Nth term is eventually bigger than equal to r2 power n, where r2 is a number bigger than 1. So when r is bigger than 1, that it gives you divergence is very easy to see, because the nth term does not converge to 0.
So what is this after R1 is equal to?
Sorry?
What is after R1 is equal to in this line? Then choose R1 is equal to.
R1 is equal to 1 plus R. Okay, wait, why did the plus sign go away? 1 plus R divided by 2. R1 is 1 plus R divided by 2. R1 could be any number between R and 1, strictly between R and 1. And I said that instead of leaving it, that pick some number between R1, R and 1, or pick an epsilon such that R plus epsilon is less than 1 and take R1 to be 1 plus epsilon. Since you can explicitly, all we need is one number in between both of them. So just take the middle point. Okay, that's all I meant. But equally valid if you take some epsilon such that R plus epsilon is less than 1 and take R1 to be that R plus epsilon, that's fine too. Okay. So the ratio test, the idea is that, okay, initially few points you don't know, but after some point onwards, each additional point you are decreasing by more than R1 power, more than multiplying the previous one by something by like R1. An plus 1 is less than equal to R1 times An. Okay. So you are decaying it at a fast enough rate so that the summation converges.
Sir, so here the epsilon actually we take to be R1 minus R, right?
Yeah, but you don't have to bring an epsilon. Okay, you can
yes,
take,
yes, sir.
Yeah.
I get that. I get that.
yeah. So if at all you want to only write in epsilon terminology, then the epsilon is R1 minus R. Yes. But taking any number between the two will also work. So yeah, if you want to write out the proof using epsilon terminology, then choose R1 to be this and take epsilon to be R1 minus R. Yeah. Or you choose epsilon to be 1 minus R divided by 2. We can write exactly the same quantity in many different ways. Yeah. So the crux of the matter is that this ratio test is very powerful to begin with. Some example where this will work. So an to be 1 over factorial n. Because what is an plus 1 by an?
By
So the ratio or an plus 1 by an is actually converging to 0. Not just it is converging to something less than 1, it is converging to 0. Right? So this is, and we can tweak this a little. Instead of 1 by factorial n, we can take x power n by factorial n, x belonging to R. Then this ratio is going to be mod x power n plus 1 divided by n plus 1 factorial. And then here it will be n factorial divided by mod x power n. And that is equal to mod x divided by n plus 1. Whatever be x, x is fixed. Whatever be x, mod x divided by n plus 1 as n goes to infinity will go to 0. So this shows that not just 1 by n, but summation x power n by factorial n equal to 1 to infinity also converges.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So if we take the summation to be summation 1 by n, then will the ratio test hold in that case?
Wait. No. This is not a universal test. Okay. So I am coming to that.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay.
Sir, I think in the ratio of an plus 1 by an, the second part, like after the equal to, you missed something.
No, I didn't understand.
Sir, second line, an plus 1 upon an equals 1 by n plus 1 factorial into an you have written. Should be n factorial.
Okay. Yeah. Which is 1 by n plus 1, correct. So this is, I mean, later we are going to study in depth this series, the so-called exponential series, but things that you have seen that and used maybe, we see that this ratio test concludes that. Okay. Now, as one of you mentioned, if you take an to be 1 over n, then the ratio, here I'm not writing, but that an plus 1 by an, limit of that is going to be 1. R will be 1, inconclusive. And not just 1 over n, but an equal to 1 over n power k fixed. Positive, k positive and fixed, inconclusive. And somewhere in school you would have seen that n equal to 1, it actually diverges. N equal to 2, sorry, k equal to 2, an equal to 1 over n, it diverges, and an equal to 1 by n square, it converges. Whereas the ratio test in both cases is giving you 1. So that is inconclusive. Now we have given two examples. Both of them, the ratio is coming to 1, converges to 1, the limit of an plus 1 by an. But one is convergent, one is divergent, and you would have some ways of proving that convergence, divergence. Right? So all of you, if there are some who are not sure or have not seen this, that summation 1 over n diverges, but 1 over n square converges, we may have talked about it already here, but if you would like, if any of you want me to talk about these two examples, 1 over an and just an 1 over an and 1 over n square. Both r is 1, but one is in convergent, divergent. Okay. So therefore, ratio test is very powerful. It gave us some the exponential series for any x, but then it fails this 1 over n thing. All right. So that is not surprising that there is, as I said, that as far as I can make out, there is no one test which will decide this way or that way for all cases. Okay. This is very easy to do, but in some cases you don't get an answer. Then you have to go, yeah.
Sir, an is equal to 1 by n is convergent, sir. I think it should be summation an.
So when I take an, the divergent is that I'm talking of summation an convergence and divergence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sir, so what was wrong with our proof?
Sorry?
What was wrong with our proof?
What was wrong in what?
Our proof earlier of ratio test.
What was wrong in the proof earlier of?
The ratio test, sir. That now it's giving inconclusive.
Oh, nothing wrong. I had already said that if r is less than 1, we get convergent. If r is bigger than 1, we get divergence. And if r is equal to 1, inconclusive. So in both these cases, r is 1 and therefore it is inconclusive. So nothing wrong in the ratio test except that it is not a universal, it is not doodh ka doodh, pani ka pani. In some cases, you know it is convergent. In some cases, you can be confident it is divergent. In some cases, this test doesn't give an answer. Right?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Yeah. So, in fact, we can come up with some weird examples. So, for example, let's say you take let us look at this example. See, Bn is 1 over 2 power n if n is even, and if it is 2 power n minus 1 if n is odd. Okay, so I've taken the original series and half of the numbers I am multiplying by 2. The odd numbers I have multiplied by 2. I have taken one less. Okay. Now what do you think is going to happen with an plus 1 by an? The limit will not exist. Because alternate, you can check that here an plus 1 by an or bn plus 1 by bn is either 1 or 1/4. And it will not converge, but this series is convergent. You can yourself see that this series is convergent.
Sir, if n is odd, bn is equal to 1 by 2 to the power n minus 1, right?
Yeah. So what I am writing is 1 half half 1/4 1/4 and so on. So the original series I'm expanding by adding up gaps, and in the gap I just repeat the previous experiment, previous number. You can come up with any such examples, okay, where you know the answer, but this test doesn't give you because the ratio doesn't converge. Okay. You understand this example? By the way, one question here, when n is equal to 1, then 2 power n plus 1, what does it mean? 2 power 0. What is 2 power 0 equal to? It is equal to 1. Okay. Can you prove it?
No, sir, it is by definition.
Yes. So the point is that 2 power 0, in order to prove it, you have to define what do we mean by 2 power 0. Unless you give a meaning to it, you can't prove anything. Okay. And 2 power 0, by convention or by definition, it is taken to be 1, so that if a and b are integers, then 2 power a plus b is equal to 2 power a times 2 power b. We deduce this. We first prove it for positive integers a and b, non-negative positive integers a and b, we prove this. Then we want to expand it to all integers. Okay. And in the process, we want it to be done in such a way that 2 power a plus b is equal to 2 power a times 2 power b. Now we have two choices. You can either say that this holds as long as a plus b is not 0. Then you have already defined what does this 2 power thing means. Okay. Or simpler, you define 2 power 0 in such a way that this equation is valid for all a and b. And that value will be 1. So 2 power 0 is taken to be 1. Likewise, 0 factorial is defined to be 1. Once again, the n choose k is equal to factorial n divided by k factorial n minus k factorial for every k between 0 and n. Either you rule out the 0 and n and you put that only for strictly in between, or you give a suitable meaning to 0 factorial. And it is found that if you give this meaning, the thing becomes easy to deal with. So these are, either you call it convention or you call it definition, whatever, but you cannot prove them. Okay. Occasionally, I mean, it's just the way you learn things. It is so fast that you have not been, as long as if you have not been alerted that you cannot prove this, people do tell me, no, sir, we can prove it, sir. We can prove 2 power 0 is 1. Because you know 2 power a plus b is 2 power a times 2 power b. Take b equal to minus a. That will tell us that 2 power 0 is 1. But if you want to do this, you have to start from how did you define 2 power 0. Okay. All right. So, we have done two examples of, I mean, you have done some examples of ratio test. And while it is the most used, but it is not universal. Okay. The next test, which is much more conclusive, but again, not completely conclusive, is called root test. Okay. So if the nth root of absolute value of an is less than 1, convergent, bigger than 1, not absolutely convergent, and equal to 1, inconclusive. And the proof is more or less about the same way. Because what this will tell you, you pick a number between the two, and mod an will be less than equal to that number R1 if you have picked between R and 1. Then eventually it is less, for large n, it is less than equal to R1 to the power n. So the proof will be exactly like here. Where did I write a proof? Yeah. The same proof will work, but instead of taking ratio, I have taken and here is the first use of lim sup, that even so in my example that I was taking alternate even odd, again nth root also may not converge. That example, if it converges, some other example we can tweak where it doesn't converge. So we need not say that the limit must exist. Okay. Even if lim sup, the same property holds, if lim sup as n goes to infinity, nth root of an is equal to n, then again the same. And lim sup equal to r will mean that you take r1, then for, so given r less than r1 less than 1, there exists a n naught such that for n bigger than equal to n naught, nth root of mod an is less than equal to r1, or mod an is less than equal to r1 power n. That is all we need. We don't need in between, etc. Of course, in this case, this if bigger than 1, I'm for that we'll need that lim inf is bigger than 1. So I'll remove that part. Now, once we go to, but often the test is there to show that whether something is, can you conclude that it is convergent? If it is not convergent, it is generally not of interest. You quickly dispose it off in some way. So the root test is used a lot when you want to actually show convergence and your ratio test is not telling you something. You can try with root test. Okay. And but our if it is 1 by n or 1 by n square, once again we cannot conclude because the lim sup is also 1. Okay. Nth root of mod an, the lim sup will be 1, and so our test is inconclusive. And there are multiple ways of, there are whole lot of tests available. Okay. But unless there is a context, there is no point keeping on doing tests. So you can search Wikipedia or Google with anything about convergence tests for series, and you will get a whole lot of things which over a period of time people have done. One or two of those will appear in your next set of exercises that I'm going to send. Okay. They are useful, but I have left it for those in the exam, in the exercise I'm going to send. Okay. So as far as doing tests in class is concerned, at the moment at least, I have only done root ratio test and root test. Okay. And so any questions on these? So I'm surprised none of you asked about, sir, one summation 1 over n, diverges summation 1 over n square, converges, and that for n, especially for square, namely k equal to 2, 1 over n power k. There are multiple ways of proving that. Any of you, can you suggest any? Any of you remember?
Comparing with 1 by n into n plus 1.
Yeah. So if you look at this series, on one hand, you know that this term is equal to 1 over n minus 1 over n plus 1. You take the multiplication, etc. That is easy. And therefore, if you take Sm to be summation k equal to 1 to m, 1 over n, n plus 1, what happens? It is this series. This is sometimes called telescopic series, or different names are there, alternately cancelling series, whatever. So the first term in the first series minus the negative term in the last series, last index. So this will be equal to 1 minus 1 over m plus 1. The rest all will cancel. We are only doing this for finitely many things at a time. So all this is fine. Okay. And therefore, as m goes to infinity, this converges to 1. So 1 over n by n plus 1 converges. And now 1 over n square you can compare.
So whether we should take n into n minus 1 in the denominator?
You can conclusively show, because 1 over n by n minus 1 and 1 over n by n plus 1, one of them will be bigger than 1 by n square, other will be smaller.
Yes. 1 by n into n minus 1 will be bigger than 1 by n square.
Yeah, and this will be smaller. So, and both of them converge, diverge with the same n, etc. So, with the same way proof. So, you can show that. So, this way.
As 1 by n into n minus 1 is bounded above. So, by that only we can say, I mean, it's a series of positive terms, right? So if we can show that it is bounded, then only we are done.
No. That's series means summation after summation, it is bounded. That comes. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That only I'm saying.
Yeah. But the idea is, you look at, he said 1 over n plus 1. So I just put that. Now you can change index n and do n by n minus 1, etc. n times n minus 1. Either way, you start with, if you do n by n minus 1, you have to do it from n equal to 2 onwards. Okay. So you have to be careful, but eventually, either way, you will show that 1 by n square is convergent. Okay. The idea is to compare this series. That's it. And 1 by n, I think I talked about that, that, you successively show that you take one, then between 2 power k and 2 power k plus 1, you change it by the smallest one, and still the whole thing will keep diverging. And that is how you show that summation 1 over n is divergent, summation 1 over n square is convergent. So these were things which people few hundred years ago had figured out how to prove. Okay, and actually compute. This is only half the term. So summation 1 over n square, that is supposed to be pi square over 6, if I'm not wrong. So there are tricks how do you compute that, etc. How do you prove that it is pi square over 6? Multiple tricks are there. So this idea of convergence of series had been very important because of the idea of approximation. You want to compute areas, you want to compute volumes, you want to compute some things which you cannot exactly get. So you keep approximating, and each time there is an error, and now you get what is, if you go a little bit further in your calculations, how much closer you can get, etc., etc. So that way your object is computed as an infinite series, and then you have to be assured that that series is convergent, and so on. So this idea of convergence of series goes back way before people started thinking of convergence of a sequence. Okay, but the way we are doing it systematically, we first do sequence, then we go to series, but then we talk about sequence of partial sums. Okay, so how does one show that this converges when k is strictly bigger than 1? This is true, and we will see how to prove it. But one way of doing it, if you look up Wikipedia or other things, that will compare it with integration test. Okay, you compare it with integral of 1 over x power k in a suitable interval, and that will give you that. But at the moment, I am not doing that because we have to do integration in our formal way later. And I'll do this comparison with 1 over n power k after we do the integration business in our formal techniques. Okay. So we will discuss again about convergence of series after I give you the questions and you do some of them and so on and so forth. We can spend more time in the class later, but I don't want to discuss things which I intend to give you as trial questions to try to answer, because that will ensure that you are understanding and will alert you if you are not understanding. Okay. All right. So today I actually wanted to start discussion on the next theme that we want to go about functions, continuous functions, and functions defined on real numbers and such things. Okay. And
Sir.
yeah.
Sir, I just maybe you have a different plan, and this is not my place to say. But sir, I think you skipped some things about subsequences, especially things like Bolzano-Weierstrass. So I just wanted to tell you that.
Okay. Yeah, I have deliberately skipped Bolzano.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's okay. I just wanted to know that, sir.
Yeah, I've deliberately skipped. We will do it towards the end, but right now I have skipped.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay. Because I wanted to one, give you chance to solve these questions which I'm sending you. Okay. So for the way to do that, I concluded was that we'll start doing continuous functions, and now and then we will return to sequences and series. Okay. Yeah.
Oh.
All right. So we want to talk about so I've put f from 0, 1 with I'm sure you know this convention that when you write a usual bracket, then this 0 is excluded and 1 is excluded. So this is the set of numbers which is strictly between 0 and 1. When you make this square bracket, then you are including 0 and 1. So all numbers which are between 0 and 1, including 0 and 1. That's the convention of the notation rather. And this is a set of all real numbers to real numbers. Now, this is called open interval, or when it is 0, 1, it is open unit interval, and if it is AB, A less than B, then it is just open interval. This is closed interval. And I have not been able to figure out where does this word open and closed come, but I will make a guess. Okay. But so strictly speaking, these things are, you are going to have somewhere or the other, I don't know as part of which course, there will be a thing called topology where you will talk about open sets, closed sets, and do all kinds of things about open sets and closed sets. And taking digression of that right now is uncalled for, but you should know. So at the moment, I'm going to list or talk about the properties that are relevant to us in the real number system. Okay. The notion of open sets and closed sets can be gone from R to R square to Rn to R infinity, or go beyond R to complex numbers, or even beyond and more things. But we are not doing that right now. So the important property of open sets, okay, are the following in our context. So any set of this kind is an open set for us. That's our definition. This is an open set. Now, if X belongs to the open set, then
So these are parentheses. I mean,
yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah, brackets or parentheses, but bracket with curly bracket. No, this is not curly bracket. This is the usual bracket or circular bracket or whatever names people use. So we have 3 brackets in choice, right? Okay, so this has not been in the context of subsets of real numbers. The middle one has not been given a specific name because a set A such that, and then you use curly braces. So this is used for describing sets, and these are used to describe intervals. Okay, first one and the third one. So here is an important property for this. For any x in A to B, there exists an epsilon positive such that you have a point in there, then there exists, at least you can go little to the left and little to the right and you are still inside that interval. Okay. And yet another property. If xn is a sequence.
Sir, just one confusion. So in the above definition, you just define that if X belongs to the open set A comma B, then there this epsilon should exist, right? I mean, such an epsilon, such
Yeah,
that.
will exist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just
Okay.
stating a fact for our definition of a open set here, A to B being open. Okay, it's an interval where the endpoints are not included. Okay. So if X belongs to that set, that means what? It is not one of the endpoints. It is somewhere in between, right?
Yes, sir. I get that.
So X is between A and B. So you can take epsilon to be X minus A power by 2, B minus X by 2 minimum thereof. So you can define how you will get hold of X epsilon. So I'm not writing any proof or any formal statement. I am just saying that the way we define this interval, this property holds. That's all I am stating. So if you have a sequence such that is converging to X and the limit X is inside this interval, then there exists a N naught such that this is trivial from the previous statement. First get hold of an epsilon and then get a N naught up corresponding to that epsilon, the way we have defined convergence of a sequence. So another way to look at it is that this open interval is such that you can't enter in and you can't converge to a point inside unless you enter inside. That's a English language way of saying the same statements. Okay. And if you had a set which is a union of some number of open intervals, same property holds. Because if X is in A, so if an element is in union of some number of sets, doesn't matter how many you have taken the union, it will belong to one of them. That one of them is an open interval. Now apply it for that. So this property that if a point X is in that interval, then given a sequence converging to that point, eventually you should be inside that interval. Automatically can be lifted to any union of sets of that kind, only any union of open intervals, that if a point X belongs to A and if Xn converges to X, then for large enough n's, you better be inside the A. Okay. So all this in topology course, formally you start the other way. A collection of sets is said to be open if any arbitrary union is also open. Okay. So that is the starting point in topology, and then you show that in real numbers with these are open intervals and so on and so forth. So, but that you will be doing separately anyway. But all I'm saying, all I wanted to note was that what is the property of open interval that we are going to be using? Okay, one is that if a point is in the open interval, there will exist an epsilon of this kind. Now, trivially, let's see if you can see this now. You take two open intervals of real numbers, two open intervals, okay? Their intersection is either empty or itself an open interval. Can you see that?
Can you repeat once again?
Think about it. You take two intervals, open A to B, and let me write down on the. Otherwise, A intersection B itself is an open interval. So, trivial to prove, let's say you assume if A is equal to C, then you take the smaller of B and D, and then that will be the open interval that it is intersection with. If it is 1 to 2 and 1 to 4, the intersection will be 1 to 2. So if A is equal to C, nothing to prove, it will be open interval with the smaller of the two intervals. So then we can assume that A is less than C. Just given nomenclature. So now if A is less than C, then it depends on whether B is less than equal to C or B is bigger than C. If B is bigger than C, then you can write down that it's an open interval from A to maximum of B and D. And if B is less than equal
From
to
C to, right? I mean, if A is less than C and B is greater than or equal to D, B is greater than or equal to C. Oh, sorry, sir.
B is greater than C, then you know that the intersection is an interval, open interval. And if B is less than equal to C, you can show that the intersection is empty. So this, you must think about it and internalize. And if there is any confusion, that means the confusion is weighing, go back. Talk to each other, not released, not confused, not resolved. Talk to TAs or talk to me, okay? But this is something that you should be able to show yourself easily. If not, that means either you have not understood the definition of this open interval. What do I mean? That this is the formally defined open interval as a set, all x in real numbers such that A is less than x and x is less than b. Okay. So with this, you should be able to talk about or see what exactly I have written. Okay. Now let me tell you some other property of a closed interval. Maybe this is not a good font. Here we have a interesting property, again related to sequences. So people who work in geometry do not like connecting topological properties with sequences, but people like me who focus on analysis and then probabilities and so on and so forth, I like to think in terms of sequences and convergence. So I'm not saying I'm better than others or they are better than me. There are different ways of looking at it. Okay, so if U is closed interval C to D, and if Xn is a sequence converging to X, then for all n, Xn belonging to U implies that X is in U. So the property is quite opposite of open sets. Open sets we talked about, you can't stay outside and converge inside. To converge inside, you must enter some time. And now what we are saying is that if you are already trapped inside C to D, you can't exit. If all xn's are in the closed interval C to D, the limit has to be in the closed interval C to D. Okay.
Sir, by entering an interval, you just mean that it has to have infinite number of its points inside the interval, right? I mean,
No, not
for the
infinite.
sequence.
At least one.
Okay.
So it so happens that if you are trapped inside, namely if all xn's are in the interval C to D, and by the way, for those who want a formal definition, this is X in R such that C less than equal to X less than equal to D, right? That is the meaning of closed interval or interval with the square bracket. This is a standard notation. Somebody could choose the exactly opposite way of putting a square and I mean open and close, but then that will be into all kinds of trouble. So the best is avoided. You must use the usual bracket as the open and this as closed. Okay. All right. So now what I was saying is that here the statement and the proof is very trivial. If all xn's are inside and x is the limit, if x is less than c, you can pick a epsilon such that x plus c is also less than epsilon, and then you will get a contradiction. If x is bigger than d, you will again get a contradiction. So that is not possible. So x must be between c and d. X can be c or x can be d, no problem. But you cannot go out. Okay. So these are two very interesting properties of open and closed. Okay. And our time is up, and maybe you have another class. So those who want to go can go. But I'll tell a very short story, 3 minutes, that people who work in geometry and such esoteric math, they dislike connecting sequences with open and closed sets. So long ago, when I was a young faculty member at ISI Delhi, one of my senior colleagues was going to be teaching topology to the same batch to whom I was teaching probability theory. And I suggested to my senior colleague that since you are going to do topology, why not you stress these two properties that I stressed just now about sequences, because they are very useful when we think about probability terms. And he says, I refuse to talk about sequences in my topology class. But fortunately, he said, if you want the students to know this, I will give you one class. You can come and talk to them about anything you want. But I will refuse to talk about sequences. So the the dichotomy is so strong. Okay. But nonetheless, intuitively, I think you would see that since we are talking convergence of a sequence, this will tell you some idea about what is an open set and a closed set. So finally, for open sets, we said you take any union of open sets that will be open in the same notion. Here, you take intersection of any number of closed intervals. I mean, in this case, it is only closed. So you take sum of finitely many open sets that will remain finitely many closed sets, it will have the same property. And then you take intersection of any number of such closed sets, it will have the same property. So next class, I will just briefly talk about this open and closed sets in the context of real numbers, and then we will go to defining functions. Okay.
Sir, this property should also hold for open interval as well.
Which one?
If x1 is a sequence converted to x, then xn belongs to u for all, and then implies x belongs to u.
No. The interval 1 over n with the open interval 0, 1. 1 over n is inside for all n, but the limit is 0, which is not there. Right?
Sir, I had just one confusion.
Huh.
Sir, in the when we speak about a open interval a comma b and a sequence xn having its limit inside the interval, then there exists a n naught such that for all n greater than equal to n naught, the xn lies in the interval x minus epsilon to x plus epsilon, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the x minus epsilon to x plus epsilon is again inside the
interval. Yeah.
Inside the interval. So then there are infinitely many terms of the sequence inside
Not
the
just
interval.
infinitely many. Eventually, it is inside. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir. I mean, I was just trying to mean that.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
So we will not be spending too much time on open sets, closed sets. I mean, one can just go on and on properties of open sets, closed sets, and various things. But we'll briefly again touch this in the next session, and then quickly move on to defining what do we mean by continuous functions. I mean, what these functions and when are they said to be continuous? That will be our starting next time. Okay. So if somebody has a question, I will look at that, but
Sir, we
yeah,
have a classical mechanics class in one.
yeah, please go, I'll stop. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.